Neutat, we have never, Kowloon, there's never been any discussion about this, but he's very smart in putting his ideas out there, showing that he's engaging with people's ideas, and this serves to spread his ideas. And I totally respect, the way that the effort that this guy has made, and the smart ways that he has come up with, for spreading his ideas. So seeing how effective Havan Tui was, and seeing how, as far as I could tell, scholars in Vietnam just had no idea how to counter any of his ideas. I went and researched and wrote a paper, which essentially is what I just told you, and it came out earlier this year. So this paper is all about deconstructing the idea of the past that these people have created. What is the actual truth? So international scholars over the past decade have come to a pretty clear vision of early history that is supported by genetics, linguistics, and archaeology. What it argues is that, of course, the first humans migrated from Africa and then headed up into China, one route from the south, another route across Eurasia, and then at a later time period, there were people who migrated back down into Southeast Asia. So here's an example of a recent study. It's talking about multiple waves of migration. Essentially, what people now argue is that, so the Huabin people were probably part of an original migration out of Africa. Then the first people to engage in agriculture started migrating into Southeast Asia and into Vietnam about 2,000 years ago, and they were Austro-Asiatic speakers, the large language family of which Vietnamese is a. Those people mixed a little bit with Huabin, but then later, roughly around 1000 BC, more people started to migrate in, people who used metal and bronze and things like that. They were also Austronesian peoples, but these people did not mix with Huabin. And these are the people we today refer to as the Ging. So the genetic, linguistic, and archaeological research that's being produced internationally talks about multiple waves, the last of which is the Ging. And each brings technologies. So, Havan Tui sees all this stuff, but his argument now, again, looking at it through a very nationalist, essentialist lens, is to say that the first people who migrated up to China were already the ancestors of the Viet. So the people who migrated down later, they're also the ancestors of the Viet. So it's still all Viet. But that's a very nationalist, essentialist perception, and there's no evidence to support that, no genetic, linguistic, or archaeological evidence. So, okay, Western scholarship is out there, there are people who engage with it, but at the end of the day, it's nationalism and essentialism that prevents them from really seeing what's there. And so I was really excited early this year to see that there's a new genetic study that has emerged that has many Vietnamese scientists who participated. However, the lead author is a ethnic Chinese graduate student. I don't know his citizenship, graduate student. And if but there's interesting things about it. So this one by international scholars talks about multiple waves of migration. This one talks about multiple sources of genetic diversity. What exactly is that? This article is interesting. If you read it, if you know that currently international scholarship talks about multiple waves of migration, you can see that this new study supports it, but the language, the way it's written, does not make that clear. And I'm very curious to know why that is. It's interesting, though, that when this scholarship was presented in Vietnam, they also did not make any of this clear. Instead, all that they talked, the only thing I saw get talked about was just diversity. The idea that genetics shows that all of the people in Vietnam are genetically diverse, therefore we're diverse. End of story. But that's not the story that international scholars are saying. They're showing you're not all the same. there are different waves of people who went down there. The Viet are the last ones. They did not mix as much with other people. They're less diverse than other people. And all of that's important because it shows, an actual history that genetics and linguistics and archaeology can document. But again, so that leaves me wondering, why would these guys talk about these findings the way they did? Why does Haben Tui talk about things the way he does? Well, they're all being very influenced by nationalism and essentialism, but ultimately, what alternative do they have? I've tried to think, where can they learn about the history of the construction of Viet identity? People like Zhen Zhongzheng, have done some things to show that, but if you don't read his stuff, you're not really going to, get these ideas. And so, it's at the end of the day, I've just come to realize that, this process that we've been in for 20 plus years of Vietnam integrating with the global world of scholarship, it's still this one where there's this, really this kind of conflict between international knowledge and essentialism and nationalism. And either people don't know the international knowledge, or they learn it, but then it's influenced by essentialism and nationalism, or people know, but they don't say anything. There's all kinds of things going on there. But as I reflect on this, I still find that this dream I had that my neighbor showed me of this world where people from across the world can communicate and engage in ideas, it's still not happening in at least the historical field of Vietnam. And I'm still trying to figure out why that's the case, and I think it would be great if it could happen. And so I keep talking about it, and I think I've run out of time. I'll end there, and I'll welcome any questions.
Thank you, Andy, for a great and very interesting talk. I learned a lot from your talk, and perfect timing too. So right now, for the audience, if you have any questions, please type it or like signal for me in the chat box, so that I can call your name. So the first question is from Hữu Phước Hoàng. Hữu Phước, do you want to read the questions yourself or ask the question yourself, or should I do it for you? If you are going yourself, please unmute yourself and put on the video. Otherwise, I'm gonna read the questions for you. Okay. Right. So the question is from Hữu Phước. He's lectures at Huế University of Education, and he read your article about the biography of Hồng Bàng Phan and comments on Keith Taylor. So from the mentioned articles, he has a question about Vietnamese are strong anti-assimilation people, and why was Hồng Bàng Thị an invented story widely accepted by the government and the people of that year?
So thank you for that question. And like from a question like that, I can see lots of nationalism and essentialism. And so what is this? So nationalism isn't people going down the street saying, I want independence. It's using the nation as the framework for understanding everything. And essentialism is believing that something like a nation has been there unchanging. So so if I want to look at the Hồng Bàng and relationship to the government, that story, its relation to the government and the people, I would say that we have no evidence that any common people ever knew anything about that until the 20th century, when you get an educational system, and when something about that starts to get taught in schools by like what's his name? God, I can't blanking on the book right now, but the history of Vietnam, and so, so this is where we have to start. In a pre-modern society, when people are living in villages, when only a tiny number of people have education, and when a story like the one about the Hung Bung is contained in texts that as far as we know, only people at the royal capital had access to. We have no evidence of, this being known by anyone. We do have evidence in the 20th century of it being taught and of, it becoming something national. So this is exactly what I say is missing. So many histories of how Vietnamese identity, Vietnamese knowledge was created over time. And what so many people do now is they take the result of, they take where we are in the 20th century, 21st century, imagine that it's always been that way. But that is nationalism. That's seeing the nation. That's essentialism. That's seeing everything as always having been that way. And that's precisely the number one problem.
Well, thank you. And the next question is from Jamie Gillen. Jamie, please put yourself.
Yes, hi. Hi, Professor Kelly, thank you for that. I really enjoyed that. I was thinking about two things related, two questions that are related to each other. The first is, in most foreigners' interactions with Vietnam, you're either an idiot and you know, te ba lo, and don't know anything, or you're totally Vietnamese. So it's one or the other. There's not a spectrum. It's either yes or no. I wonder if you could speak to that with respect to being told that you don't know what you're talking about. But more importantly, the question is let me try and formulate this. I really liked your autobiographical introduction. And I wonder if being told no, or being told you don't know what you're talking about, how has that shaped how you interact with you?
Yeah, thank you, Jamie. That's really good questions. The first one, spectrum. I think there's a spectrum. So, I certainly would want to credit some of like my Han Nom colleagues, because a lot of those, even though maybe they haven't heard of like invention of traditions, imagined communities, and all that, they can read the primary sources. And when you can read the primary sources, you can see the difference between what's written there and what people say about it. And they get it. There's, I definitely, from the very beginning, there's always been people in the Han Nom community who totally understand what I'm saying, even though they haven't been exposed. It's interesting. I find that in this kind of age when there's this rage for publishing, Gongbong Book Day, for publishing internationally, the Han Nom people are okay. They can produce stuff that can get published in Taiwan and things like that because they've got that foundation of being able to base things. People don't know what they're talking about. But yeah, I think it's exactly that. It's when you are told you don't know what you're talking about, get offended by that, and there's something in there that sets a fire and it burns and it motivates you. But I think it's good to have that fire. Because why keeps you going, makes you do something. What would I do if I wasn't? So yeah, very good questions.
Okay, the next question is from Tiffany Nguyen. Could you please elaborate on why Ha Văn Thủy has been quite influential, except for your argument that nobody had ever challenged him?
Okay, so his, let's not say Ha Văn Thủy, let's look at this broader group of people starting Ung Dinh Tang and these others. Those ideas, if you go on the internet and you go to Wikipedia, those ideas are there. If you look for something like Văn Hoa Lúa Nước, Wet Rice Civilization, it cites Solheim, it cites Ung Dinh Tang. These guys have, so this gets to this other issue, and I couldn't really figure out a way. The digital age, the internet has transformed our worlds. The way people get knowledge today is by going onto the internet. Ha Văn Thủy puts information on the internet. Ung Dinh Tang put information on the internet. all of these people are out there and their information is getting essentially institutionalized out there. Scholars don't do that. And when they don't do that, their ideas go unnoticed. And so, you know, that's okay that I would see them as influential. I'll just leave it at that.
All right. So, Joe Buckley, you are the next. Please unmute yourself.
Yeah, lovely. Really interesting talk. I've got your new article on my to-read list, but I haven't got around to it yet. But I'm wondering if there's perhaps a more material explanation for why scholars are so into this nationalism and essentialism idea, which is just kind of limits to Vietnamese academia, that they don't have access to journals, you can't afford to fly in the big international scholars to give kind of one-off talks that everyone can attend, and you need to be very proficient at English to be able to access these ideas. So do you think that to me it seems that that's probably an important factor as to why Hammontley and others' perspectives keep circulating and are so popular, not only just because of kind of intellectual bias. How do you respond to that?
Thanks for that. Yeah. So that Hongga Dilken, don't have the conditions, has been the number one sort of excuse for probably 30 years. And 30 years is a long time to Hongga Dilken. And over those 30 years, as I was living in Hawaii in a tiny apartment with an old beat-up car, and I watched scholars move into nice apartments, drive nice cars, they have Dilken. Everyone has them. Havantui doesn't know English, and yet he goes out there and finds ways to figure out what people are saying. He's got friends who help him. He works his butt off, as far as I can tell. And so, yeah, the material, I don't buy that anymore. Linguistic thing, access, though, English and all that, yeah, again, you know, interestingly, that's something Chinese, this whole thing, actually no, they can then access all the Western theory that's been translated into Chinese. And I know like a lot of people who know both Chinese and English would go to the Chinese stuff. It's a lot easier for them to figure out. And so my argument would be there are multiple ways, and there have been multiple ways, and the don't have the right conditions has been there far too long. And so, yeah, I was sympathetic with that before, but not to be. But thanks for bringing it up. Yeah.
All right. The next question is from Alisa Warwick. And Liam, do you think Chinese scholarship has the same issues of essentialism?
They must. I mean, I don't. I mean, so like. Yeah, I mean, there's been cases like, I don't pay a lot of attention to Chinese scholarship, but there's been cases where, you know, I've read stuff, like a similar thing where you had some Chinese scholars who participated in a genetic study, and I've compared what was written in the English language version. They're totally different. The Chinese one was totally essentialist, you know, sort of seeing the current ethnic groups into ancient times when the genetic evidence didn't show that at all. So yeah, the same things. But and this one comes up a lot, and this kind of relates to the people saying, well, the Chinese do it too. Okay, but just because someone else is doing something that's bad doesn't mean that it's okay for you to do the same thing. We should all be trying to do something better than what the Chinese are doing. And so, but yeah, the Chinese, I'm sure it exists there, exists everywhere.
Right.
I mean, that's exists everywhere.
Yeah. The next question is from Lanang Huang. Please, Lanang, unmute yourself.
Thank you, India, and for a fascinating talk. And apologies to everyone. I'm the host, but I don't know why we don't have the raise hand function in today's seminar. Maybe Zoom has changed their configuration and we don't have it anymore. But yeah, I have a million questions for Anyan. I have to read your new article because I still don't know at the end of the talk. whether where we come from and whether we were the first people to settle in Asia and even before the Chinese. Maybe there's clear archaeological and genetic evidence to prove that. But as a social scientist, I'm more interested in the essentialism and nationalism in the discourse about the Viet as the first people, as the people who come here first before the Chinese. I'm really confused about, as a Vietnamese, I don't understand myself about Vietnamese sometimes very extreme nationalism, like, bordering, sometimes it gets ridiculous, at the time of major sport event or coronavirus and so on. And then in other times, then we see very clear feelings of inferiority, xenophilia, like we feel like we are inferior to people from, comment on that, is there, can you please explain?
I don't think there's anything, in that respect, I don't think there's anything sort of particular about Vietnam. I mean, God, look at America. Trump, the people who oppose him, come on, that's just, there's no place crazier than that. And I think it's totally fine that a society has someone like Ha Van Thuy and his ideas. The problem for me is that there isn't a clear vision or understanding that comes from the scholars themselves, from the professional world inside Vietnam yet. And so, like the geneticists themselves, the genetic scientists, they themselves don't really seem to understand, as far as I can tell, what the genetic data actually shows. Or maybe it's political, they can't say it, I have no idea. But the nationalism, every place has some people who are extreme nationalists, and everyone has a, but what you, as scholars, what we want is something, that can show people a reality, or something that, isn't nationalist, that's something that's based on scholarly ideas. And that's the thing that just doesn't emerge, as far as I can tell. And so for me, that's the thing that's particular, that we're trying to figure out.
Thank you, Liam, for the answers. So anybody have any other questions? Why? I think we still have around 10 to 15 more minutes for Q&A. If yeah, so the next question is from Sun Kim Park. He's curious about the work that the Vietnamese scholarship is doing under writing like have Van Thuy, and if the Vietnamese scholars are as nationalists and as essentialists, how are they any different? How are they different?
Oh yeah. Let's see. No, I just didn't hear it with all the beeps there. Okay, so it's right. So the problem of essentialism and nationalism. So someone like Ha Van Thuy is trying to really tell a glorious story about the Viet. Okay. And so other scholars, when they write about things, that's not necessarily, they're not trying to do that. But they will, they will put in their, here's an example. So like, one scholar who's very well respected is the late Trần Quốc Vượng. And when I go back and read his writings from the 90s, I find lots of essentialized ideas in there. And I see those ideas repeated in, in contemporary writings. So just to take one example I saw recently, Trần Quốc Vượng said that one thing that's special about Vietnam is its Binh Bạn Đảo, its Bán Đảo, its peninsular character. And so somehow the fact that peninsula is something that's important. Okay, so that is essentialism. It's saying that it's geographic determinism even. It's saying that the physical space of Vietnam is somehow really, really water and land. Okay, now let's step back and think about this. Vietnam is not really a peninsula. It's on this thing called the Indo-Chinese Peninsula, but the water on the other side is in Thailand, right? It's not, unless you're in the far south, right? So a peninsula is a place where there's water on both sides. If you're in Hanoi, there's no water on the other side. If you're in Yanchum, there's no water on the other side. So it's not really a peninsula. It's just has a coastline. And so if we're going to say that Vietnam is important because it has a coastline, as the United States, as a million other places in the world. But, you know, this is something that will get repeated. Vietnam is important, it has this peninsular character to it. That's the type of thing that you'll find in other scholarship. It's, you know, it's not really trying to say the Vietnamese are the greatest people in the world, but it's trying to say there's something special about Vietnam, this kind of essence that's always there, but in reality it's not. If you compare, it's, you know, you're saying something that's found all over the place. And that's the kind of essentialism that's much more common.
Okay, and Lian, the next question is from Van Bin Zuong, with regards to the wet rice. Is for many a religious phenomenon in Vietnam, like respecting women or goddess devotions. What do you think about that?
Okay. So, scholar. So, no. So, I'm just saying. So this is. Here's my one saying something historical about respect for women. Immediately you start going, whoa, 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 whoa. How do we know there was respect for women? You know, that there is a goddess or a female figure that is worshipped doesn't mean that there is respect for women. You know, would we, Chinese worship many, many female deities. Do we make the argument that Chinese have respect for women? I haven't heard that argument. They, you know, so this is the problem. There's a lot of these things that people have said, they repeat it, but they haven't stopped and actually the idea at City Guangdu, Bia, all across, can we see respect for women? What actually is that respect? Just because a female is worshipped doesn't mean women are respected. And so, you know, when I hear something, you know, the thing that starts going through my brain.
Yeah, okay. So I think we're gonna. I have two last questions. The first one is from Kim Si Trans, and she asks, is Vietnamese being used as an equivalent to the king ethnicity?
Yeah, in many situations, yeah. I mean,
alright.
Yeah. Just careful, they'll be, they shouldn't do that, but yes, often it is.
Yeah, so basically, when you're talking about just like Vietnamese being as the king ethnicity, it's not as diverse as many scholarship that claims to be, right?
Right.
Yeah. The next question is from that Nguyen. As more Vietnamese students trying to study the humanities and social sciences, history, what do you think?
Same topic. Let's see. One, a couple of years ago, I got access for my own dissertations. And yeah, I started to compile, this is something I'm planning to write about. I tried to compile like a database, or I tried to collect together all of the dissertations that have been written in China about Vietnamese history. And there's a lot of them that are written by Vietnamese. But at the same time, there's also quite a few dissertations and MA theses that are written by Chinese who have lived in Vietnam and know Vietnamese. And I don't have the answer to that yet.
let's see. Okay, the one good thing that happens is that, okay, so like for instance, when a Taiwanese scholar comes to, or when a Vietnamese scholar introduces a Western scholar to
món từng chạo bao nhiêu thằng ra máu rồi chưa mày. Nói cho mày nghe hết hồn.